Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and analyze one of the most chilling transformations in modern history: how an unknown Austrian agitator entirely dismantled the democratic Weimar Republic to become a totalitarian dictator. For those of you currently studying 20th century European history, understanding the actual mechanics of this ascent is absolutely crucial. We aren't just looking at dates and battles here, we're really unpacking the anatomy of how absolute power is seized. As a political historian, I want to give you a clear roadmap for our analysis today. We'll be moving through 6 main parts: the roots of his radical ideologies, his time in World War I and the stab-in-the-back myth, his strategic shift after a failed coup, exploiting the Great Depression, the actual collapse of the democracy, and finally, his totalitarian control and use of propaganda. Let's get started. Section 1. Roots of Radical Ideologies. Our first major turning point takes us way back to his early life. You know, to really understand the political figure, you first have to look at the deeply personal conflicts of his youth. We see early signs of a profound desire for control in his intense, frequent clashes with his strict father, Alois. His dad was a civil servant who tried to just browbeat his son into obedience and force him to follow in his footsteps. But honestly, this only fueled his rebellious nature. In his later autobiography, he even claimed that he intentionally failed his classes at the Realschule in Linz, hoping his father would just give up and let him pursue his dream of becoming an artist. It's this stubborn refusal to conform that set a real psychological baseline for his later radicalism. Then comes Vienna. His years as a struggling artist there really formed the toxic core of his future political ideology. After being rejected twice from the Academy of Fine Arts, he lived this impoverished, bohemian lifestyle. But Vienna itself was a massive political education. He was exposed to Mayor Karl Lueger, who masterfully used populist tactics and intense anti-Semitic sentiment to get votes. He absorbed pan-Germanism, anti-Slavic sentiments, and read pamphlets warning of an influx of Eastern European Jews. Now, he didn't invent these concepts, right? But Vienna provided the raw, toxic ingredients he would later weaponize. Section 2. WWI and the stab in the back. Let's see how these ideas evolved into formal political motivation. We have to turn to World War I, a period he later called the greatest of all experiences. This conflict provided the ultimate traumatic catalyst for his entry into politics. He voluntarily enlisted in the Bavarian army and served as a dispatch runner on the Western Front, earning the Iron Cross. But the defining moment hits in October 1918. He was temporarily blinded in a mustard gas attack. While he's lying in a hospital bed in Passwalk, recovering, he gets the shocking news of Germany's sudden capitulation. His wartime experience had massively reinforced his extreme German patriotism, so this defeat left him completely devastated and deeply, deeply embittered. So, the crucial question is, how does he mentally process this defeat? Well, he, like a lot of other extreme nationalists at the time, fully embraced the Dolchstoß Legende, the totally unfounded stab-in-the-back conspiracy myth. He honestly believed the German army was undefeated on the battlefield, but betrayed at home. He used this myth to scapegoat minorities, specifically Jews and Marxists, as well as the new democratic leaders, blaming them entirely for Germany's post-war humiliation under the crushing Treaty of Versailles. Section 3. Failed coup to political strategy. This brings us to a massive change in his tactical approach. Because agitation is one thing, but taking over an entire nation requires real strategy. He initially tried force. In 1923, he attempted a violent takeover of the government in Munich, known as the Beer Hall Putsch. It was an absolute disaster and landed him straight in Landsberg prison. But here's the thing. This failure was his greatest political lesson. He realized that a violent overthrow wasn't going to work in the Weimar Republic. To destroy the democratic system, he couldn't just attack it from the outside. He had to participate in it, win elections, and legally subvert it from within. And while serving a surprisingly light prison sentence for treason, he definitely didn't waste time. He codified his hateful, exterminatory ideology into a political manifesto called Mein Kampf. Dictated to his chauffeur and then to Rudolf Hess, the book laid out explicit, terrifying plans for a race-based dictatorship and territorial expansion, what he called Lebensraum, or living space in Eastern Europe. The anti-Jewish rhetoric evolved right here, from abstract political theory into the exact framework that would eventually precipitate the Holocaust. Moving on to Section 4, Exploiting the Great Depression. Despite his new legal strategy, the fragile Weimar Republic might have actually survived him.
Politics had somewhat stabilized by the mid-1920s, but then comes the devastating economic catalyst. Following the 1929 stock market crash in the US, the impact on Germany was catastrophic. German unemployment skyrocketed to over 6 million people. Major banks collapsed. This created a terrified, desperate populace that was suddenly incredibly eager to listen to radical solutions they had previously completely ignored. Tracking his party's electoral growth is wild. Back in 1928, they were an obscure fringe group with just 2.6% of the vote. But by targeting people directly affected by the Depression, farmers, veterans, the middle class, and promising jobs while trashing the hated Versailles Treaty, his party capitalized on extreme economic fear. By 1932, they had jumped to 37.3%, officially becoming the largest single party in the German parliament. Once he eventually secured power, he rapidly addressed this unemployment crisis. He appointed Helmer Schacht to shift Germany entirely to a war economy. Through massive, secret rearmament funded by MIFO bills and colossal infrastructure public works like the Autobahn system, unemployment was driven down from 6 million to under 1 million by 1936. While wages actually remained low, this perceived economic miracle initially won him massive popular support and unfortunately blinded so many to his darker motives. Section 5. The Collapse of Democracy. Now we examine the grim mechanics of how a democratic republic is legally dismantled. Following the events from January to March 1933 is chilling because it shows exactly how fast a democracy can fall. In January, conservative politicians convinced President von Hindenburg to appoint him as chancellor, mistakenly believing they could control him. Just weeks later, following a highly suspicious fire at the Parliament building, he convinced Hindenburg to sign the Reichstag Hire Decree. This completely suspended basic civil rights and allowed for the arbitrary arrest of political opponents, specifically the Communist Party, without any trial. Then, in March, he brought the Enabling Act to a vote. With his stormtroopers, the SA, physically intimidating politicians inside and outside the building, and communist deputies already thrown in jail, the act passed. This law officially allowed his cabinet to enact legislation without parliamentary consent. He essentially weaponized the democratic constitution against itself, legally securing absolute legislative power. And just like that, the Weimar Republic was dead. Which brings us to our final section, totalitarian control and propaganda. With legal controls secured on paper, he maintained his totalitarian grip through terrifying internal purges. He knew that maintaining power meant eliminating any threats, even from his own die-hard supporters. The SA, his own paramilitary wing, was demanding more power, which was alienating the traditional German military. So, in the summer of 1934, during the Night of the Long Knives, he ruthlessly eliminated potential internal rivals. He orchestrated the assassination of his own SA leader, Ernst Röhm, alongside former political adversaries. He effectively bought the loyalty of the traditional army with bloodshed. But interestingly enough, there was a massive disconnect in how he actually ruled. To the public, he projected this image of a flawless, unified, charismatic savior. But his actual inner command structure, it was intentionally chaotic. He handed out contradictory orders and assigned overlapping responsibilities to his ministers. He purposely fostered distrust, extreme competition, and infighting among his subordinates. This ensured that they were always fighting each other for his approval, rather than ever uniting to challenge him. And of course, we cannot ignore his brilliant, dark mass psychology. He ruthlessly exploited documentary films, radio broadcasts, and massive, highly orchestrated rallies to manipulate national sentiment. Listen to how one former Hitler Youth member vividly recalled the experience. We erupted into a frenzy of nationalistic pride that bordered on hysteria. From that moment on, I belonged to Adolf Hitler body and soul. He didn't just govern, he manufactured a hypnotic cult of personality. He used grand spectacles to turn the desperation of the German populace into an instrument of his own will. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place in August 1934, when President Hindenburg died. He immediately enacted a law merging the offices of the presidency and the chancellorship. He formally took the title of Führer und Reichskanzler. The traditional military oath was fundamentally altered too. Soldiers no longer swore loyalty to the nation or to the Constitution, but personally, by name, to Adolf Hitler. His transition from an unknown fringe party agitator to absolute dictator was complete. As we wrap up this explainer, we've mapped a really dark journey from personal childhood resentment to the heights of totalitarian control. So I want to leave you with this crucial historical question to consider. How does a modern, educated society allow an agitator exploiting economic fear to legally vote away its own democracy? Think about that intersection of desperation, the exploitation of democratic loopholes, and the terrifying power of propaganda. Reflect on the fragility of democratic institutions when faced with a demagogue willing to use the system to destroy it. Keep all this in mind as you continue your study of the 20th century. Catch you next time.